Time to get started talking about some of the nuts and bolts of the financial part of the Barefoot system. I'd like to just start off by saying that the Barefoot agent system is a property-based trust accounting system, and you'll probably hear me say that more than once during our discussion, because it's a really important basis for how the system actually works. So I'm going to start by taking a look at a reservation, and I just want to explain a couple of terms. I'm sure you'll find that in looking at different software platforms that we all use kind of different words to mean some of the same things. So when we're talking about a reservation, we might call it a folio, but some people might call it a lease. You'll see here that we do have a reservation. It has a particular number. Obviously, they'll be incremented in steps of 1 for each new reservation that's made. And then right next to that, you'll see the word regular. What that is a reservation type. What a reservation type is it is a method of setting up rules based on how you want to collect money and how you want to pay money out and to who you want to pay that money to. So you can have a myriad of different reservation types. I have a list up here of the different reservation types that we have in this particular demo system. You might find that you have similar rules for when you take a reservation over the phone and when you take a reservation over the internet. But you might have a little bit different set of rules for when you take an owner referral reservation or a monthly reservation. So what we've done is we've just given you the ability to select a reservation type for the type of stay and have those rules already defined. So that takes kind of the thinking out of that reservationist job. Most places in the software, you have a lot of hyperlinks so you can navigate really quickly and easily through to different places in the system. But a service basically is just an item that you're going to charge to a guest or to an owner and pay out either to the guest in the example of a security deposit refund, to your owner in the form of rent, less commissions, and then to your various vendors for your taxes and your travel insurance and all those other items that you might charge for on a reservation. So just kind of wanted to lay the groundwork for what those terms actually mean in regards to the Barefoot system. One of the items that I wanted to talk about today is owner accounting. And we'll come back to this reservation and we'll kind of follow the flow of money through the system and take a look at how you would go about paying people, either owners or vendors. But first, I'd just kind of like to touch on the owner. What we'll see here is that we have areas for basic information. You'll see that the Social Security number or tax ID number is only partially visible. But I can fill this in with all kinds of information. I can have a company name if I'd like to. Certainly, I'd want my email address in here to be able to email statements and other correspondence. The more information that you have, the better. If I have an alternate contact for this property, I can fill that information in on the right-hand side of the form. And I can tell the system which portion of the record to use for their check and for correspondence. You might have a situation where a brother and sister own a property. She gets the statements, but he wants to get all the other correspondence, or he gets all the correspondence, she gets the check and the statement. I can see a list of my properties here. So from this page, you can kind of gather that we can have one owner that owns multiple properties. At the same time, we can have one property owned by multiple people. Because we can hyperlink into that property record, I'm just going to go right there and just kind of show you that we can have more than one property owner on a property. All I do here is I click into the contact info on the property information page, and I can see that I'm the primary owner, but I can also see that Mike is a 50% owner in this property. And what that means is when we get through the process of actually processing revenue and creating our property statements, we'll see that we get 2 statements for this property with a 50-50 split of the whatever payment, whether it's an ACH payment or a check payment. I'm just going to go back to the owner record and just also show you that functionality here. We can choose different payment types. I might pay this owner by check, but I might also pay that owner by ACH. There are actually circumstances where an owner doesn't want to get paid for a specific period of time. We can set that here in this in their owner record, and I could also do that on the fly when I'm actually creating their property statements. I'll show you that functionality in just a few minutes. Because the system is a property-based system, we talk very much along the lines of creating property statements, even though kind of historically throughout time, especially in my experience, we always talk about sending owner statements to the owners because we're sending the mail to a person. But we have to keep in mind in the system it's called a property statement. The next item on our list is closing the period functionality. And in the system, we don't really actually close a period. What you'll do is you will be able to pay your owners however frequently that you'd like to. And you kind of aren't hampered by having to close a period to be able to start a new one. And so one of the things that I like about the system is that there are far fewer mandatory processes in this system than there are in other systems that I've worked with. And what that means for you is that you don't have to remember every day or every week to click certain buttons and process certain functions to make money move through the system. One of the things that I like best about this system is that the accounting is extremely transparent. I'm going to go back to our reservation and just talk about that for a little bit. So I know I have reservation number 136 in place, and it's all set for showing you some of the items that I'd like to show you today. So like I said, we have a regular reservation. It's all set with certain rules to collect money at specific periods of time. You'll see up here in the top section in the bills, invoices, and payments that we were set to collect a specified amount on the date that the reservation was made, and that's the contract date. And then we were to receive additional funds, I believe it's a month prior to arrival. And we've added some extra charges here that look like they're due on the day that the service is being rendered. And what you'll see there is that we've got some golf packages on our reservation that aren't meant to be paid for until the actual day that they're going golfing. Complete this reservation, you'll see that we have rent, we have cleaning, we have inspections, and we have some tax. We've got our golf, and then I've actually entered a rent discount here. So we have our total due from the guest based on the fact that they've actually made a payment so far. I can see my payment highlighted here in yellow. I took that payment when I created the test folio, just to be able to show you that as soon as money is received into the system, it is automatically allocated and applied to specific services. We set the payment application based on what your needs are. If you want to collect rent first and then collect all of your other services after that, we can set that up. Likewise, if you'd like to take your processing fee and pay that to yourself prior to the guest actually completing their final payment, we can set that up as well. But what's important to know is that as soon as money has been received, it's applied to the specific service, and it's then allocated to be paid out based on the payout basis that you tell us, that you specify. So in one of your markets, let's say in Florida, I know that along the Gulf Coast, most of the agencies that we work with will receive their final payment prior to arrival, and they will pay their owner based on the arrival date of the folio. In this particular case, we've set this demo up to pay out based on the departure date. So what would happen basically is that money is being held in the trust account and in your bank account, applied to services pending this date that will release that money and be able to pay it out. So when we talk about the flow of money through the system, that's basically kind of in a nutshell what happens. Money is received, it's applied to certain services, and then it's paid out based on the rules that you set up or have us set up in your different res types. So you can have some funds that pay out based on the departure date. You may have some funds that pay out based on when you receive the money. And that's all very workable within the reservation type. I'm going to go ahead and just jump into batch management. This is the functionality in the system, or the place that you would go to process payments out of the system. It's actually very easy. What we can do is we can either search for or create new statements. We have a bunch of other helpful links here that would make looking up information very easy. I'm going to go ahead and just see if I have any property batches that have been started and not completed. I always like to run that search first. And I can see here that in my list, I have all closed batches. So I am actually ready to go and I can create a batch for October. From here, I can do either property, vendor, agent, or tenant statements. Typically, most of our clients stick with the property and vendor statements. Property statements are, of course, where you're going to produce your owner checks and statements. Vendors, this would be your accounts payable module. And one of the aspects of the system that I really enjoy is the fact that I don't have to learn two different processes to process my money out of the system for my owners as opposed to my vendors. It makes it very simple and pretty easy to learn and retain. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick with properties. I'm going to put in my date here that I want to collect up information through October 31st. I'm going to give it a comment so that when I go to search, I have something that's easy to look at. Once I type that in, I can either create a batch leaving all of this information blank, or I can use these fields to narrow down my batch to just a single property or a single owner. But I'm going to go ahead and collect up everything. I now have what we call our statement account list. And from here, basically, this is what I'm going to use to review the information that's going to be printed on my owner statements and then either sent or emailed to the owners along with their check, or emailed and then using an ACH deposit to pay them. It's really easy to come in here and make changes. If I see anything while I'm doing my review that needs to be edited or removed, I can do that very easily. Once again, I can come in and look at specific statements, or I can look at all statements. I'm going to keep it simple and just take a look at these two. On the statement, I see that I have the ability to keep and maintain a reserve fund for the owner. That's functionality that's controlled by a configuration switch that can be turned on or off depending on whether you do that in specific markets or not. When I come down here to my Dreamers Retreat number 3, I can see that I have a previous expense from a prior month that has been taken out of my reserve fund, but that I also have on my Folio 136, I have income of $312 and commissions as an expense of $148.20, but then also as income of $14.82. And I wanted to show this to you this way because when we look at the reservation, I see that I have rent as well as a rent discount that is income to the owner. And that did not get broken out into two lines. It's actually what we call service mapping. You can service map so that multiple services can be combined into one line item on your statement. So if I wanted to, I could then service map my commissions and it would just show the net amount of the expense to the owner. We have a nice summary section on the property statement, as well as occupancy information that we find many of our clients like to have that there. I just want to touch on briefly our ACH capability. ACH is actually extremely easy in the system. I'm in the back end here. I've come in through our settings into our trust account information, and you'll see that we have information that would be necessary to fill in here on the back end to be able to push through to our ACH or Notcha file that's created through the batch management system. So once we have all this information from you, we can put that in for you. Part of the security is that that's not something that can be edited by our clients, just because it is so important that it does not get changed. That's all put in, and we are in our batch. We're going to go ahead and we've gone through our review. We might have used our statement report view to take a look at everything in the batch, and we've decided that everything looks good. If I need to, I can export that to Excel. Once that review is done, I'm going to go ahead and record my transaction, and you'll see that the page here changes. Now, I do have the ability to take a look at the same reports across the top. I can unrecord this if I find that I've missed editing one of my reservations and I need to go back. But before I close it, I have some new action items that I can take here. For example, if I want to, I can, and I highly recommend this, go ahead and select your check and you select your ACH payments, and you'll notice that that automatically puts a check mark in all the boxes. And I can enter my check date. I might be processing for the end of October, but I'm not actually doing it until November 5th. So for my payment transaction reports and my bank reconciliations, I want the actual transaction date, not the statement date, to be associated to those payments. That's going to take a moment to refresh. And now I can see that my date here is in red, indicating to me that I have actually manually changed that. I'm going to want to go in and I'm going to want to assign check numbers. Some of our clients do like to select and set ACH numbers as well. I can do that simply by clicking on the assign check number. And the system is going to, of course, keep track of the most recently used check or the first new available check in my box of checks. So I'm going to go ahead and just click that assign check number button. And I'll see that those check numbers now populate in this column here. If I need to, I can add a comment to an individual check. I can also add a comment to, there's a switch that will allow me to add a comment to each and every statement. If I wanted to put something on the statement saying, hey, please note that our address has changed and remit your checks to this new address, you could do that. So from here, all I need to do to create my Notcha file is come to my drop-down menu at the top middle of the page, click on Create ACH File, and click on Go To. And just that quickly and easily, I have my text file, which I can then open. I can then save it. You'll see that it's a standard Notcha file. So from here, we'll go back to our accounting menu and take a look at our tax reports. We noticed on Folio 136 that we had 3 different taxes associated to that reservation. In the setup of those services, all we have to do to indicate that, or to put those services as available in our tax report is to just set one setting that says it is actually a tax service. And then we'll be able to come to this report page here. And if I'm looking at trying to pay taxes for the month of June, I can leave my date range the way that it is. I can use any of my search criteria from my book sale page or my search for properties page. If I need to narrow down this report based on a property type or a location, I can. If not, then all I have to do is click on the hyperlink to generate the report. It opens in a new page. And I find this to be extremely helpful. I know that in prior software platforms that I've used, the sales tax reporting was not necessarily this clear. And I actually had to use an outside Excel spreadsheet to kind of back into what my taxable rent and my taxable other services would be. So when I first started using the system, this was just something that I thought was brilliant and saved me a lot of time. Because one of the first things that I can do is I can come into my report and I can quickly take a look down the right-hand side of the page, and I can spot any problem folios that I might have where I have not charged the correct amount of tax. You might say that, well, you know, if it's all automatic and the tax percentage is already set in the price table, then why would there ever be a mistake or a discrepancy? And it's because there's people involved, you know. A reservation can be in place for months or even a year, and in that time, maybe dates change, maybe the number of people's changed, and you know, every once in a while there's just a mistake. So it's very, very easy to come through here, take a look down the right-hand side, and hyperlink into any, you know, click through the hyperlink into any folio that might need a little bit of adjustment. And then you could just regenerate your report or just refresh it. You don't actually have to close it. You can just refresh. So you'll see that we have all kinds of good information here. Basically, for most of the clients that we have, the bottom line of this report is the most important. It's going to give you your basis for your tax payment for your taxable rent, your basis for your tax payment for your taxable other charges, and the amount of the sales tax that you should remit for that period. At that point in time, basically what you would do is just come into our batch management system again and create a batch for your tax vendors. One item that some people kind of tend to gloss over is the fact that these attributes that we have, or amenities, are actually available for a vendor record as well. So if I wanted to pay all of my 4 tax vendors at the same time, I could go to their vendor information page, set up an amenities and call it sales tax vendors. And when I go to actually create my batch, I would be able to have that amenity available so I could create a batch very easily for those 4 vendors and not have to worry about bringing in other vendors that might not get paid at the same time. Another item that I'd like to go through with you today is some of the kind of deeper reporting that we have in the system, as well as some of the day-to-day reporting. Under our accounting menu, we have our banking operations section of the menu, which gives us 3 different actions that we can take. I can take a look for payment transactions that have happened in specific date ranges. I can do this for multiple trust accounts. Trust accounts can be, we can have more than one trust account in the system as long as each property is having transactions in and out of only one bank account. So if you have a set of properties in Ocean City and then maybe a set of properties in Rehoboth, you might have 2 different bank accounts, but you could manage those properties in the same database as long as the money always stays separate for the 2 different locations. I can search for different kinds of transactions based on what information I'm looking for. If I am simply trying to reconcile my credit card transactions with the batch that I've been emailed from my credit card processor for the day, I can do that, just uncheck everything else, check my credit cards, and potentially my credit card chargebacks, even though I don't like talking about those very much. And then I can set my date range. I can see payments that have been received, payments that have been paid out. I can leave that blank for both, which is typically what I would do. And if I wanted to see transactions that happened, I know that we took one payment on that folio 136 on the 26th, so I'll use that date. You can use a date range. It doesn't have to be a single day. You can generate a detailed report or a summary report once you've determined whether or not you need any of this other information filled in. I'll come back and talk about deposit slips in just a moment. And we don't have credit cards turned on in the system, so I'm going to actually open this back up and look for everything. So I can see here my reference. Is this a folio payment? Was this a payment from an owner? And it would be given a different designation if it was a payment from a property owner. I have all the information that I need about these payments, and then I get a summary at the bottom of the page. This is a handy report. You might have locations where people are responsible for a cash drawer. If you do, then we actually, when we talk about roles, we'll know that we don't necessarily want everybody to have access to the accounting menu. So we have a daily cash report here in this menu that's also available under the reservations menu. So if you need to have staff members that are not privy to the accounting menu run a daily cash report, they can. It's the same basic information that we saw in the payment transaction report, just organized a little bit differently. But from my payment transaction page, I can also create deposit slips and I can look at bank reconciliations. A deposit slip in the Barefoot lingo is basically a mechanism to collect up transactions that have all been deposited in one deposit. So if you're using our system to actually reconcile your bank account, which I highly recommend, it makes it much, much easier to have a one-to-one relationship between a deposit slip in the system to a bank deposit on your statement, rather than having 10 checks or 100 checks that all came in on the same day that got deposited in the same deposit, and trying to reconcile each one of those to one deposit on the bank statement is nightmarish at best. So that's just a mechanism that makes the bank reconciliation process really easy. I know that in my prior experience working down in Florida, doing a bank reconciliation, may have taken me, a half a day to do in my old system, and now I can do I can do 3 bank accounts for operating and 2 trust accounts, and in both Barefoot and in QuickBooks, and I can have that done in about 2 hours. So it's really utilizing this system compared to my prior system has really gained that company some efficiencies. One of the things that I wanted to show you, though, in our bank reconciliation is how all of this kind of ties together. We started off looking at a folio. We've received money. We saw how that money was applied to services We saw how that money, or how that payment generates a due date so that it'll pay the owner and pay different vendors. And now I just kind of like to bring it full circle. We're going to go ahead and do a search for some reconciliations. I'm going to go ahead and go into a November bank rec. It's pretty standard. You know, you're going to see your deposit slips. I can see that this is my October deposit and this is my November deposit. I've gone ahead and I've set my bank reconciliation up with my dates that my statement ending date. It's going to pull my beginning balance from the ending balance of my prior statement. As I check off these items as having been cleared, it's all very clear that it changes the amount on the left-hand side. It also changes my outstanding deposits and outstanding checks. And then this is where I think it gets kind of cool, because bank recs are not necessarily all that cool, but when we tie this piece, which is our trial balance total, into the bank reconciliation so that you know that you are in balance, your transactions are in balance with your statement, and your ending checkbook balance is tied to your trust account liability. And I know I'm being a little bit mysterious, but I'm coming about it and I'm going to make it all make sense. In our advanced accounting reports, in this list, if you are familiar with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission's requirements for software compliance, you'll know that these reports are what are required by North Carolina. The most important report here in regard to the bank reconciliation is the trial balance report. What this does is it keeps track of every transaction that has ever occurred in the system, whether it was a payment of 25 cents for a stick of gum at your concession stand, or whether it's a $10,000 payment for a deposit on a reservation, payments out to the owners, payments out to vendors. Every transaction is kept track of. So when we look at our trial balance report, what it's going to show us is a list of properties and the corresponding amounts that are being held for each service for that property. So when I just run the report, it's going to take just a moment for it to populate. Here's our list of properties. Here's our columns for each of the services. Each service has a total at the bottom. Each property has a total along the far right-hand side. And then our grand total would be our trust account liability. So you would know on a daily basis to pay all the money that you were supposed to have on hand out. This is the amount that you would need in the bank based on your adjusted balance in your bank reconciliation. And I think that that's pretty cool. I know I had a tough time in some of my prior software experience of tying a balance sheet to my actual bank account balance. I thought it was more difficult. Some of the other reports that are in that advanced accounting menu are sub-reports to the trial balance. The property ledger and the subsidiary ledger report basically will provide backup information for what's in all of these columns or across a property. It's very handy to have an accounts payable journal to be able to run before you create your vendor payable run, to be able to run this report. And I know it's very standard, but not all systems have it. I used it all the time when I was working down in Florida to make sure that I had the amounts correct before I did my payables run, before I created my batch and it became more troublesome to make changes. I can run this and actually see what's due and set to be paid out to which vendors. I can match it up to the invoices that I have in my file, and I can cut their checks really easily with fewer mistakes.